Jen on fire today. Let me bring in my man, Michael Maloof. Michael Maloof, he is a former senior security policy analyst in the Office of Secretary of Defense, author, and regular contributing analyst on RT and other media outlets. He has nearly 30 years of federal service experience, and he is a damn good friend of this show. Michael, man, welcome to the show. How you doing today? You doing okay?
I'm doing great. I hope you are as well.
I am making it. I am making it.
That's at least you're here.
Yeah, a bit of pain, but I
Okay,
am muscling through all of it. It's not a
that's all you can
muscle.
do.
I'm not going to complain. You are the man I wanted to talk to today because there's a lot
Uh-oh.
of stuff that is effectively taking place. You have tariff wars, giant that have dramatically expanded between China and Russia. You have Trump sending apparently an envoy meeting with his Russian counterpart in Saudi Arabia. No, Turkey. Turkey, actually. I want to get your take on that before I start on anything else. It seems that there are multiple tracks of negotiations, and it may not even be multiple tracks. It may just be a fork that end up coming merging back together. Um, Kirillov, I think it was Dmitry Kirillov, eventually came to the United States last week. Those talks apparently went relatively well, or at the very least well enough for them to have additional talks in Turkey. What do you think this means? I mean, because the war is still continuing. Russia seems to be planning an offensive, if not have already started one. And yet, you still have, okay, we're releasing, let's say, some of the sanctions. We are allowing direct flights now from Russia to the United States, meaning they're making diplomatic overtures between each other in a way that we didn't see for years, going back all the way even to the Obama administration. What do you make of it? Is it small? Do you find it to be significant? Give me a
Oh,
take on
it's
this.
very. I think it's very significant. It's a whole shift in the geostrategic paradigm from previous years. I think Trump's goal is to um, do an overlay of a geostrategic relationship with Russia on many fronts. He wants to reestablish those relationships, which up until now had all been predicated upon the whole Ukrainian nonsense, and to this day nobody can explain to me what the national security imperative was of the U.S. getting involved there in the first place. Europeans are on a different scale. They're looking for relevance in light of what they're seeing of Trump and Putin trying to work out and renewing relationships. Um, and this has. I was talking to an Iranian colleague yesterday, and
Mhm.
it also there's a lot of trepidation about negotiations in the Iranian sphere at the same time as you see trepidation and the issue of trust between Russia and the United States. Nobody trusts the United States.
They
That's
shouldn't.
what seems that's what seems to be emerging, and for good reason. They're very, and especially now with Trump, who's taking this initiative to open up relations. Yeah, he's being bombastic. Well, if you don't talk to us, we're going to bomb you. Well, he did that with North Korea, and we saw what happened there. They all kissed and made up for a time, but Trump does not. Trump can neither afford nor wants a war with Iran. At the same time, he's going ahead with relations with Russia. It's a slow, tedious process because you have to regain trust, and that is the major monumental issue right now. Of and while Trump can complain, well, the Russians are still bombing the Ukrainians. Well, there's no ceasefire except a limited one on energy resources, and the Ukrainians have been violating that like
Violate.
crazy. and the Russians have withheld, and yet and at the same time, the Russians have complained to Washington about that, to say, look, we're not breaking that agreement. It was a very limited one. It was a test to see, the sincerity of Kyiv and Russia in wanting to negotiate. Kyiv has been violating it like crazy, and at the same time, you have Trump saying, okay, but he still wants to meet, and he's now, as you pointed out, trying to undertake certain relaxation of sanctions. We had a release of an American Russian dual citizen just this morning that worked out, and that's another sign of progress. It didn't have to happen. This was the ballerina, and who paid $50, I guess, to a Ukrainian charity, and which the Russians said was treason.
That's a no-no. Yeah, that's a no-no.
Yeah. Don't do that.
Yeah.
But we're seeing signs, and I think it's going to take time. It's not going to be the 24-hour nonsense. It's taking time. It's that element of trust and developing a level of confidence, and I think that's going to be the overarching geostrategic interest of the United States, as opposed to just Ukraine. Although trying to settle Ukraine is going to be a major part of moving forward progress in that relationship with Russia, because the United States has major strategic interests with Russia, which Ukraine is virtually insignificant, and it's a troubled area. And the Europeans, however, continue to want war. Trump does not have control any longer over his allies. And I think at this point, he's probably figuring it doesn't matter if after I've settled something with Russia and the Europeans still want to do their thing, the United States is not going to engage in yet another suicidal experience on behalf of the Europeans, because that's been the history of their existence for the last 500 years. Yeah. They just don't know how to save themselves. And in the 20th century, they needed the United States twice. And we're seeing a pattern of behavior. We now have a history of experiences that we can see the trend, and the United States needs to wake up and tell the Europeans, if you continue on this route, you're going to put yourself into trouble, and economically, they're in deep trouble. They wouldn't be able to muster enough resources to undertake a continuing war with Russia. Russia will swamp them if they undertake, if they go on their own. And I think the people of Europe realize that, as opposed to their elitist leaders. You're seeing the beginning of the end of globalization that they try to foist up by the neoliberals on us, and that's coming to a quick end. And I think it's the beginning of end of NATO, and I think it's time, because we've moved on from the war in the 20th century. We got to move on and undertake new relationships. We're seeing China. It has its own issues right now with the United States on the trade issue, and it's trying to muster the BRICS countries and the global South now to stand up and deal with it, because right now China, the United States, has been its primary customer for all of its goods, and they have all these manufactured items, and they have an industry and people they've got to keep content, but they don't have alternative industries. Europe cannot afford it. Europe doesn't want Chinese stuff because of the quality. Quality is, and also China will undercut, as they have the United States industries, and all of their industries are government supported. Well, that over time that begins to show wear and tear on the ability of a country to move on economically. They are an exporting country. They cannot afford. The Chinese cannot afford, nor can the Russians, a war of Iran being at war because of the importance, the geostrategic and geopolitical location of Iran for its north, south, east, west corridor, for its economic future, BRICS, Belt and Road. That's all important to Russia and China. So everything, it tends to be related, you know. And then you got to figure where does Netanyahu fit in all this? Some people feel he's got some kind of hypnotic trance over Trump.
Trump, right?
It's unbelievable. But all is not cozy in that relationship either, by the way.
I'm glad that you mentioned Netanyahu. So when after he, dragged his criminal ass to Washington, and Donald Trump, I mean, mind you, just murdered a 14-year-old American.
Yeah.
You just had the execution of those aid workers where their arms were tied behind their back, buried after being executed, dumped into a shallow grave with a truck, an ambulance buried on top of them. Netanyahu is welcomed into the White House as if nothing is going on. After the meeting with Trump, he comes out and says this. Now, I'm not going to play it because it's not in English. But what he's saying here effectively is, well, I had a conversation with Trump. The conversation went well, and we decided that the Libyan option may be the best option for Iran. Now, anybody that knows anything, when you hear the term Libyan option, it is explosive. I remember when they said that about Kim Jong-un, and he flipped out. He lost his mind. Because what they're talking about is effectively Gaddafi being sodomized with a machete and murdered, with Hillary Clinton cackling. We came, we saw, he died, meaning we sent the jihadists in there that initiated all of this stuff. Iran, when you say that the U.S. is not to be trusted, I think back to Wesley Clark. What is it, 5 nations in 7 years? Iran being the last nation. And if you think about it, through multiple presidents, they've had a successive or coherent strategy where they've taken out one government after the next, and now they're landing on Iran. And the idea that I'm going to negotiate when ultimately I know that at the end of the day, you're trying to have my destruction in your mind seems to be outlandish. Now, I can imagine that the Russians are saying, negotiate, talk to them. If you can avoid some larger thing, do so, because we don't want a war. And hence, you get the Oman conversations that are going to take place over the weekend. But I keep thinking to myself, what Trump is probably going to want, especially taking this maximalist demanding thing of, we're going to bomb you if we don't get what we want. Okay, well, if you accept that premise, you can ask for anything, right? We want the ballistic missiles. We want your nuclear things. Hey, we want your scientist's head on the pipe. You can ask
that's his that's his bombastic approach to get attention. That's how you grab them by the short and curlies to grab their attention and control the narrative. Then they negotiate.
Control the negotiations. If you believe that you're under threat in a negotiation, you give me more than what I would typically take. It's a bullying tactic.
Sure it is. And that's how he's always operated when he used to do his real estate stuff. And being a typical New Yorker, that's just their style. Now, most people are not accustomed to that. However, I think with Iran, it's going to take the help of Russia for this reason. Trump has never distinguished between Iran's legitimate nuclear reactor development capabilities versus making a bomb. There are 2 fatwas against making them. And the intelligence community to this day still assesses that they never resumed that weapons development program, even though they have cycled up enriched uranium up to 60%. Mm-hmm. And, they passed a certain threshold, but there's also legitimate medical reasons to have 60% for advanced cancer research and medical purposes. So there is a legitimate purpose for 60%, which is not indigenous to to Iran. They have people who need advanced medical treatment for cancer, for example, have to go abroad to get that. Switzerland or France,
Right.
they don't have it indigenously. Now, I think if Russia makes a presence makes a guarantee to the United States that their presence in building these reactors, and they will oversee. And the Russians and Putin himself has said, we do not want Iran to have a nuclear weapon either. But I think as long as there is a Russian presence in Iran, that will help oversee any weapons development or give some assurance, in addition to trying to bring in more international IAEA coverage to ensure against that. But there's got to be a distinction between legitimate nuclear development programs, which Iran is entitled to do as a nation state. They are a signatory to the NPT.
Michael, I find this conversation to be outrageous, and I'm going to tell you why.
Please.
Israel has gone on a murder spree
Sure.
all across the Middle East, Syria, Lebanon, Gaza, West Bank. They have killed indiscriminately women, children. They've raped. They've destroyed hospitals. They've destroyed tents. They've blown up apartment buildings to get like one person, killing hundreds within the context of the process. 50,000 to 100,000 people are wiped off the face of the earth, and they are still on a killing spree. They have an open air ghetto. And on top of that, I guess my point is, and they have nukes. Yes. Iran hasn't invaded anybody. And we're having this conversation as if Iran is the problem. Iran has every right to develop nuclear, to their heart's content. And the notion that Netanyahu is complaining for 30 years that Iran is getting a bomb. And as you point out,
this is one other aspect that I think needs to be brought out. Israel, and I think Trump needs to force this. There has to be an open admission to the fact that Israel has nuclear weapons. And that needs to be publicized. And their nuclear weapons need to be kicked out of the Middle East altogether. Make the Middle East a nuclear weapons free zone. And the only way you do it, you see, for years, previous administrations have basically ignored that. That needs to be now brought out, and for transparency reasons. Trump needs to push that, and the Iranians need to broadcast that loud and clear as a condition, and get Israel to start denuclearizing on its own in order to ensure safety. But at the same time, you got to have both countries agree, both Iran and Israel agree, that they're not out to destroy each other. Now, I haven't seen evidence where Israel or where Iran has said they want to destroy Israel. But even though they claim there's claims to that effect, but I've never seen it in writing. But no. the reality is that there's, I think with outside with Russian and U.S. Involvement in trying to work out a resolution. Look, the Israelis can go ahead and they have and kill innocent people who are defenseless. Iran is not. Iran's a different story. And now they may try to do to the Iranian leadership what they did to the Hezbollah and Hamas leadership, and with the hope of trying to cripple and promote regime change that way to get people to rise up. But the experience with Iran has been that it's shown the Iranian people have shown resistance. They may not like the government so much, but they do like their supreme leader. Mm-hmm. There's a difference, and consequently, we have to understand that from a cultural perspective, from the Western perspective.
But you say that as if fairness is the objective. Fairness has never been the objective.
I'm looking for ideas on how to resolve a lingering problem,
and by the way,
no one's come up with any.
I totally accept that. But the
No
reason
one's
no
come
one
up.
has come up with any is because the issue is about power, not fairness, not ethics, not
I
morality, not
agree.
what's right. Their thing is, we want to take this territory, so we're taking it.
Well,
We
we've
don't
gone up to
believe.
a certain precipice, and if we go beyond that precipice now, we're going to have regional war,
Mhm.
and it's going to bring in the Chinese and the Russians. I think it will have to,
You
and
really
we got
think
to
the
avoid
Chinese will
that.
get involved? See, and that's a fact, and I'm glad you bring that up. You're reading my mind. So right here is the new partnership that the Russian State Duma ratified. Do you think this is coincidental that this is being ratified now?
No, nothing is happenstance. It's meant to send a message. Now, I don't know that that partnership necessarily
It doesn't.
implies coming to, like an Article 5 of NATO, an attack on will automatic. I don't think it
It doesn't.
encompasses
No.
that.
Mm-mm.
No, but it does provide for other assurances, and the Iranians can get defensive weapons if they want
Hmm.
from the Russians, and I think that's well, they've already started. So, but at the same time, Russia is sending a message to Trump that this is strategically important for us, and
Hands off.
and just as your relationship with us is important to you. So I think that that there's got to be a compromise here, and the Netanyahus and the Zelenskys have got to be put in a little box on the side and contained, and told be a good boys, and while greater geostrategic efforts are undertaken to try and maintain a peace. And I think that's Trump still boasts of his friendship with Xi Jinping, even though
Does
they're
he?
undergoing this temporary
Trade war.
trade war, which will simmer down. It'll simmer down.
It
But
will simmer down.
and that's an issue in and of itself. They can only go so far before the Chinese economy begins to really feel it. But they also realize, but China has got to realize that it only has so many equities, and it's produced all of this stuff that most other countries may not want. But there has to be some trade equity brought in because of this disparity that we've seen in trade for years by these countries, and including Europe. So there's a variety of things going on here at the same time, and it all seems to be interconnected.
But but they've decided to. Oh, okay, two things. In this treaty, as the treaty also promotes investment in oil and gas development, joint long-term projects, and peaceful nuclear energy, the
There you
creation of
go.
a payment system,
Boom.
independent third parties, and national currencies. When I saw nuclear energy, I was like, oh, okay, that's
That's what
interesting.
I'm talking about. That's where I think the Russians can be helpful in coming to a resolution on and try to simmer down this confrontation that appears to be the case right now. But Trump did say, "Look, they've got time. We've got time. We're just yesterday." He said, "We're working on it. It's going to take time." He that's an admission on his part. He's not going to go bomb them tomorrow, but I don't think he's going to bomb them at all. But I think it is a way to get the conversation going and to upgrade it. And I don't know that Netanyahu is all in favor of that.
I know, but Iran is not a threat to us.
No, it's not. It's a threat to Netanyahu. But we've always looked at Iran through the prism of Israel. I mean, ever since I was at the Pentagon, you mentioned General Clark. I had people I was working with at the Pentagon who told me that Baghdad was going to be the hub for regime change in all these countries, including Tehran, Damascus, even Saudi Arabia at that time. All in Libya when it was still under Gaddafi. All these countries that at that time were against Israel. So that policy has not changed.
You must understand this is very frustrating to me because, from my point of view, it's an outrageous conversation. Like the idea is that like Israel has nukes unacknowledged, and They are a fascist, insane state. And yet we're looking at Iran saying, yeah, seems like you need to be tested, you need to be checked, you need to be inspected. It's like,
Well,
but that's the conversation, right? That's the lens.
but what I'm saying is that Iran and the United States need to acknowledge that now. They need to publicly, and there needs to be an effort made to get Israel to denuclearize its weapons.
Do you think there's a deal to be made here? And if so, what would that deal be?
Oh yeah, well, I think a deal can be made. Yeah, I mean, you can make a deal out of anything. Um, I again, I think it's going to take the assistance of Russia to help us out
Agreed.
on the nuclear reactor side. If there's a Russian presence, I think that should give some, because they have openly said we don't want Iran to have a nuclear weapon either. Even though Iran has said they have fatwas against it. We need to get them to continue honoring that, but and also bring in the IAEA to allow
Oversee.
for assurances. To what extent you see the nobody trusts anybody right now. That's the problem. So there's got to be a period where you rekindle that element of trust, and it right now it just doesn't exist.
Michael Maloof. He is former senior security policy analyst in the Office of Secretary of Defense, author, and regular contributing analyst on RT and other media outlets. He has nearly 30 years of federal service experience in the U.S. Department of Defense and a damn good friend of this show. Great spot, Michael. I really
Well, I
appreciate
hope
this.
you're
Thank you.
not frustrated with me, but with the situation.
I'm not frustrated with you at all. I love you to bits. I really appreciate you coming in. It's the situation that frustrates me because I keep like the conversation is often put through this lens of, well, Iran needs to do so and so. And it's like, what do you mean Iran needs to do so and so? They haven't invaded anybody.
I
And
agree.
we look at this other person, it's like, okay, but the lens, as you pointed out, this is always looked through the lens of Israel. Okay, well, I'm an American. I don't live over there. And more to the point, between the two, one of these things is not like the other. One of these things is very problematic in the way that it operates. And yet, there's all of this focus on the other. And to me, it comes down to where the United States, we get to dictate outcomes. And I think that's outrageous.
Well, let's see what comes out of these meetings. The fact that they're meeting is important, and it's a
It's a
good
good
thing.
thing. Yeah,
Yeah,
in
it's a
Oman.
good thing. As long as they're talking, they're not shooting at each other, and that's what's important.
Thank
But I think there needs to be an education on the part of the United States. There needs to be they need to hear the Iranian perspective and hear from there's two sides to every story here,
you.
and
Yeah.
that needs to be brought in. Plus, you have these other elements that also come into play that need to be taken into account. So this is not operating in a vacuum. This also encompasses what the Chinese and the Russians want, and I think that's why it's important for Russia and the United States to get their strategic act together and renew the relationship so they can work together. And I think that's evolving now. That we're heading in the right direction. But
From your mouth
it's
to God's ears.
yes.
Michael Maloof, thank you for this, man. I really appreciate it.
See you later.
You be safe. All right. Another guest on